Welcome, friends and foes, survivors and killers. Let's sit around the campfire together and talk about Dead by Daylight. Specifically, the killer for Resident Evil Project W, the mastermind Albert Wesker. If everything DBDLeaks has given us is true, and there's a lot of it to pick through, we're in for a real treat when Project W hits. More or less the entire chapter's worth of content has recently been leaked. It seems like we're getting Wesker based pretty much exclusively on his appearance and moveset in Resident Evil 5, the game in which he is the primary antagonist. Ada Wong and Rebecca Chambers have had model assets and perk icons leaked, but Wesker has everything, from his model to his perks to his power, and I've got to say, I love it. For those who haven't seen, this is what we're looking at. His perks make the killer able to effectively do a fast vault after a survivor fast vaults, allow the killer to see the aura of nearby survivors when they're carrying someone, and inflicts broken on all survivors who aren't healthy between the completion of the last generator and the beginning of the endgame collapse. All really interesting perks. I'm looking forward to trying out Terminus on twins especially, but it's his power that really gets me interested. His power, Virulent Bound, allows him to charge up and use a dash, vaulting over any windows or pallets that are in the path of the dash. If he hits a wall with it, he can use it once more. If a survivor is hit with it and Wesker crashes them into something during this bound, it will damage the survivor. If he doesn't, he will throw them instead and damage them if they hit something. If the dash passes through a survivor, he will infect them with Ouroboros or progress their infection if they're already infected. Infection hinders you, and it looks like that will scale depending on how infected you are, and if you're fully infected, Wesker bounding onto you will have him instantly grab you onto his shoulders. The supply crits like the one Nemesis has will make a comeback, and these will contain first aid sprays that will remove infection and have limited charges. So that's what we're looking at here, and looks to be very heavily based on Resident Evil 5's evolution of Wesker, where his main gimmick is moving so quickly that it looks like he's teleporting. While it looks like an interesting power I might really enjoy playing with, that's never really been my favourite part of Wesker personally, although I do know in the minority on that one. A lot of people think I don't like Wesker, but that's not entirely true. I think Wesker is an excellent secondary antagonist for the early Resident Evil games, especially the first one where he provides the means for Umbrella to start meddling directly with the protagonists Chris and Jill. He took a backseat in Resident Evil 2 and 3, which was for the better because those games are both bangers and Wesker didn't really need to be in these very Raccoon City focused stories, but he came back for Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4, where he functions as a side antagonist who ultimately benefits from the outcomes of both games' main stories. While he is empowered by the T-Virus at this point, it's barely relevant to the story because his presence is more as a manipulator or planner than an actual aggressor. I'll be going into that in more detail when I cover Wesker's role in RE's story more thoroughly at a later date, but suffice to say I think Resident Evil 5 is Wesker's at his worst and frankly Resident Evil's writing at its worst. This is why I didn't particularly want Wesker in Dead by Daylight, because if he was coming, it was always going to be his Matrix cosplayer RE5 version, and I think that's memorialising the worst of Resident Evil. That being said, I know how popular Matrix cosplayer Wesker is, and I'm more than willing to put my personal discontent aside to acknowledge that Wesker's definitely going to be a crowd pleaser, if these leaks are to be believed. And we should believe them, I think, because there's so much here that I don't think someone could have fabricated this much stuff this quickly. Even down to the perk charms that only came out very recently, and to do it all in time before the reveal of Behaviour Beyond on August the 3rd. So much of it fits with Behaviour established MO for chapter releases. From the post-it note of lore that the RE characters get to the kinda dorky but ultimately sufficient power name, if this isn't real it's a very convincing fake, and whoever made the fake should be very proud of themselves. The only serious misgiving I have is this part of the leaks. That Wesker's old voice actor DC Douglas is back to voice the character in Dead by Daylight. For those who don't know, DC Douglas voiced Wesker for his last 10 appearances in Resident Evil games, and extended media like Teppen, including Resident Evil 5, which this iteration of the character is clearly meant to be. But I really hope this part of the leak isn't correct, because DC Douglas doesn't have the best track record of not being a piece of shit to fans. There's been a lot of substantial allegations against Douglas since 2020 of creepy sexual behaviour to fans, including potentially underage girls, at conventions. If they're getting Douglas back to voice Wesker, that's incredibly disappointing, and Behaviour and Capcom should both be deeply ashamed. And while the leaks do claim Douglas is voicing the character, I have my doubts as to the truth of that, because we don't actually have any voice lines yet, although we do know he's getting them. And Douglas did say he's long since retired from voicing the character earlier this year, So of all the parts of the leaks, that's by far the least credible. As an alternative, I'd love to have Richard Waugh, the voice actor who voiced Wesker in Code Veronica and Resident Evil 4, back to play the character again. He based his performances as Wesker on Scar in Disney's Lion King, and despite not having the same name recognition as Douglas, would still be an excellent alumnus of RE history to have returned to the role. Hell, Peter Jessup, the voice actor for Wesker in the original RE1 remake, would also be great. He provided the voice that Douglas would go on to base his performances on, and would be a great substitute for the, sex pest. If you're excited for Douglas to return to the role, then good for you, I guess. But it just doesn't sit right with me, and is the one black mark on an otherwise really exciting and promising set of leaks. As an adaptation of many people's favourite RE villain, I'm really impressed with what we seem to be getting. And whether it's true or not, we won't have long to wait to find out, because Behaviour Beyond is on the 3rd, and will likely tell us everything we need to know. So what do we think? Do we think these leaks are accurate? I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you like the video, please do drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and if you want to watch something with a bit more meat, please go check out the last video I made. It talks about the Hellraiser and Crypt TV NFT projects, and has some really enlightening stuff. I worked so goddamn hard on it, so if you're interested in that sort of thing, please do take a look, it's a real treat. In the description you can find links to my Discord, Twitch, Twitter and Patreon if you feel like supporting the channel. Patrons are already seeing this video since they get a day's advance viewing, and if you're interested in that privilege then the link is right down there. Have a great rest of your day and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.
You will give me an egg!